When Carmelo Anthony stood on the Hall of Fame stage, he thanked his mother with love. But then he turned around and gave his heart and soul to Puerto Rico, and that's the moment Black America said, "Hold up, Melo. What about us?" On September 6, 2025, Carmelo Anthony reached the pinnacle of basketball immortality when he was officially enshrined in the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, Massachusetts. For many, this moment was not just about celebrating one of the greatest scorers the NBA has ever seen. It was about honoring a journey that stretched nearly 2 decades. Across different cities, cultures, and eras of the game, his career spanned 19 remarkable seasons, filled with unforgettable milestones, 10 All-Star appearances, multiple All-NBA selections, a scoring title, and a glittering record of international triumphs with Team USA, where he became one of the most decorated Olympians in basketball history. Each achievement carried its own weight. But what stood out most during that evening's ceremony was not the list of statistics or the highlight reels. It was the authenticity of Carmelo's words, the way he peeled back the layers of his public persona to reveal the human story behind the athlete. His induction speech was not just a formal expression of gratitude, it was a window into his heart, his history, and his dual identity. Standing on the stage, dressed in elegance and pride, Carmelo used his platform to speak directly to the communities that molded him into the man he became. The Black community, which raised him, nurtured him, and gave him the foundation to navigate life after losing his father at such an early age. And the Puerto Rican community, which tied him to a heritage he did not fully understand as a child but embraced more deeply as he grew older, eventually becoming a bridge to the father he barely knew. This duality, African-American upbringing and Puerto Rican heritage, shaped the complexity of Carmelo's narrative, a story that resonates with many Americans who straddle more than one cultural identity. But before he turned outward, before he offered praise to larger communities and national identities, he looked inward. He looked to the woman who never left his side, the person who carried the burden of raising him and his siblings in the face of hardship, his mother, Mary Anthony. His tribute to her was not just obligatory, it was heartfelt, layered with genuine gratitude. It revealed how Carmelo understood that behind every Hall of Famer stands someone who made invisible sacrifices. While fans know the star who shined at Madison Square Garden, or who dominated in Denver, Carmelo reminded everyone that his journey began in the home of a single mother who refused to let circumstance define her children's future. In many ways, Carmelo's acknowledgement of his mother that night carried more weight than the trophies and accolades. Basketball careers are fleeting no matter how brilliant, but the lessons instilled by a mother who teaches perseverance, humility, and resilience last a lifetime. He spoke of her sacrifices not as abstract virtues, but as the lived reality that shaped his character. When he was young, she was the one working tirelessly, ensuring there was food on the table, providing discipline when needed, and encouraging him to chase dreams that seemed improbable for a boy growing up in West Baltimore after losing his father so early. That moment in his speech symbolized more than personal gratitude. It was a universal reminder of the role that Black mothers have historically played in sustaining and uplifting families under conditions of hardship. For Black America, his words echoed a broader cultural truth. So many great athletes, leaders, and innovators owe their beginnings to women who held families together in the face of systemic struggles. Carmelo's praise of his mother, then, was not just about one household, it was an acknowledgement of a collective story, one woven deeply into the fabric of Black history. Yet the speech did not end there. After centering his mother, Carmelo expanded outward, addressing the two cultural identities that defined his life. First, the Black community, the one he was immersed in from childhood. Baltimore shaped him, and New York gave him his swagger, his accent, his sense of style, his toughness. Even his basketball approach all bore the influence of the neighborhoods he grew up in. The Black community taught him how to survive, how to stand tall in adversity, how to embrace brotherhood, and how to navigate spaces where opportunities were often scarce. When he honored the Black community, it was not just ceremonial. It was a recognition that his success on the court was inseparable from the foundation laid by the culture that raised him. Then, he shifted to the Puerto Rican community, the other half of his identity, one connected to his father, Carmelo Irie, who passed away when he was only 2 years old. Carmelo admitted openly over the years that much of his understanding of his Puerto Rican heritage came later in life. As a boy, it wasn't present in his daily reality the way his Black identity was. But as he matured, he sought out that side of himself, finding ways to honor his roots through symbolic gestures like tattoos, as well as concrete actions, like creating initiatives in Puerto Rico to rebuild basketball courts and give back to youth on the island. In speaking to Puerto Ricans during his Hall of Fame speech, Carmelo was doing more than ticking off a box of acknowledgement. He was reaching across the gap between himself and the father he never had the chance to know. Honoring Puerto Rico was, in many ways, his way of honoring his father's memory. This balanced praising the Black community for raising him while celebrating the Puerto Rican community for connecting him to his paternal lineage sparked discussion and debate afterward. Some argued that his words leaned too heavily toward Puerto Rico, given that it was the Black community that carried him through his formative years. Others saw it as an understandable act of healing, an effort by a man who lost his father too soon to establish connection where absence had always been. But what cannot be denied is the sincerity with which Carmelo delivered his message. He spoke not as a politician calculating optics, but as a son, a community member, and a man who knew he stood on a stage that symbolized both individual greatness and collective legacy. The resonance of Carmelo's speech lay in its honesty. Here was a man who had seen the world, competed against the greatest, and reached heights most athletes only dream of, yet in his crowning moment, he chose to center gratitude, community, and heritage. He reminded everyone that greatness is never achieved in isolation. Behind every legend are the sacrifices of parents, the strength of neighborhoods, and the pride of cultures. For Carmelo Anthony, enshrinement in the Hall of Fame was not the closing of a basketball career. It was the affirmation of a story that began in Brooklyn, was shaped in Baltimore, and tied forever to two communities that define him.
You taught me that love is action, that sacrifice is quiet, that faith is louder than fear. To every woman watching tonight, this moment is yours too. You are not behind us. You're not beside us. You're the reason we rise. You don't just shape homes, you shape legacies. My mother was the first one to show me what sacrifice looks like. No spotlight, no praise, just love in its purest form.
Carmelo Anthony's roots run deep through both sides of his family. His father, Carmelo Ivory, carried features strikingly similar to his son, though with a lighter complexion, while his mother, Mary Anthony, anchored the family with strength and resilience. Born in New York and later raised in Baltimore, Carmelo grew up at the intersection of two powerful identities. His mother was African American, his father Puerto Rican. Tragedy, however, touched his life early. Anthony lost his father to cancer when he was only 2 years old. Years later, standing on the Hall of Fame stage, he chose to deliver a special tribute to the Puerto Rican community, honoring the part of his heritage that connected him to his late father.
So Puerto Rico, my blood, my soul, my heart. I carry the flag in my heart. I carry the island in my veins. When I wore those colors on my chest, I wasn't just playing basketball. I was honoring the heritage. I was honoring my father. I was honoring every Puerto Rican who's ever had to fight twice as hard to get as far. Puerto Rico, you gave me fire, you gave me soul, you gave me home. We are proud, we are powerful, we are present. This Hall of Fame moment belongs to the island, it belongs to us.
For many in Black America, Carmelo Anthony's Hall of Fame tribute stirred mixed emotions. What should have been a night of unified celebration became, for some, a moment of tension and questioning. The frustration stemmed largely from the fact that Carmelo was primarily raised by his mother, whose sacrifices he openly and lovingly acknowledged in his speech. Mary Anthony stood at the center of his upbringing, guiding him through the turbulence of losing a father at just 2 years old, holding down a household, and instilling in him the discipline and resilience that would later carry him through a 19-year NBA career. For those who know the history of Black families in America, her story is familiar. The single mother who becomes not only a parent but also a mentor, protector, and foundation. When Carmelo honored her, he touched on a truth that resonated with countless people who understood the weight of such sacrifice. Yet what struck a nerve was not what he said about his mother, but what followed. Carmelo's upbringing was deeply rooted in the Black community, shaped by the unforgiving streets of West Baltimore, where violence, drugs, and poverty often loomed as constant threats, but where community bonds, culture, and resilience also thrived. His New York beginnings gave him an accent, a style, and a swagger while Baltimore instilled in him toughness, humility, and determination. Even his cadence, the way he speaks, a blend of New York sharpness with Baltimore grit, a cultural imprint of the environment that made him, from the playground courts where he developed his scoring touch to the neighborhoods that embraced him as one of their own. It was this Black cultural ecosystem that carried him forward, so when he devoted a powerful portion of his speech to the Puerto Rican community, some questioned where that left the community that had truly raised him. To be clear, no one was denying the validity of his Puerto Rican heritage. His father was Puerto Rican, and Carmelo had, in adulthood, sought to connect with that side of his identity by supporting initiatives on the island and wearing its symbols with pride. But the optics mattered. To many, it felt as though he elevated that part of his background to a level that overshadowed the community that had actually shaped his day-to-day existence. Critics like Tariq, Nasheed, and others framed it as more than just a personal oversight. They saw it as part of a broader, recurring pattern. Within Black America, there has long been frustration with how contributions from the community are often overlooked or minimized, while other identities or heritages are celebrated without controversy. When non-Black athletes, entertainers, or public figures acknowledge their ethnic or national backgrounds, whether Nigerian, Jamaican, Puerto Rican, Dominican, or otherwise, it is rarely called divisive. In fact, it is often celebrated. Yet when Black Americans assert pride in their distinct lineage, particularly those who identify as foundational Black Americans, FBA, it can be labeled as exclusionary or problematic. For critics, Carmelo's emphasis on Puerto Rico in such a high-profile speech seemed to feed into this double standard. The disconnect, then, wasn't about denying Carmelo's right to honor Puerto Rico. It was about recognizing who carried him through life when his father could not. The people who encouraged him when he was just another kid with a dream in Baltimore. The coaches, mentors, and peers who sharpened his competitive fire. The neighborhoods that embraced his success as their own, long before Madison Square Garden ever echoed with chants of Melo. Too many Black Americans, it felt as if those years of cultural shaping and communal support had been compressed into a footnote. While the symbolic ties to his father's heritage were elevated to center stage. This isn't to say that Carmelo was wrong to acknowledge Puerto Rico identity is complex, and his journey to embrace his roots is genuine. But for Black America, his speech reopened deeper questions. Why is it so often the case that when Black communities are the ones who sacrifice and raise a figure into greatness, the credit gets shared or shifted elsewhere? Why is Black cultural influence sometimes invisible until it's convenient to highlight? Carmelo's tribute was heartfelt, yes, but it unintentionally exposed these underlying tensions. And in doing so, it reminded everyone that Hall of Fame speeches are never just about sports, they are also about belonging, heritage, and the politics of identity.
Carmelo was born in Brooklyn and his dad was born in Manhattan to Puerto Rican parents. Sadly, Carmelo was only 2 years old when his dad passed away from cancer, so it was later on in life that he learned more about his Puerto Rican heritage. As Melo learned more about his Puerto Rican roots, he wanted to do more to help out the island. So in 2010, he set up La Fundación Carmelo Anthony on the island with the initiative to build or restore at least one cancha or basketball court in.
For some fans, Carmelo Anthony's Hall of Fame speech sparked a surprising revelation. Many admitted they didn't even realize he was Puerto Rican. His heritage had always been there, visible in tattoos and family ties, but it wasn't something at the forefront of his identity growing up. Carmelo himself was born in Brooklyn, while his father, also Carmelo, was born in Manhattan to Puerto Rican parents, with his father passing from cancer when Melo was just 2 years old. Much of his understanding of that side of his background came later in life, as he matured. Anthony began embracing Puerto Rico more intentionally, even creating La Fundación Carmelo Anthony in 2010 to give back to the island. One of the foundation's goals was to restore or build a basketball court each year, using the game he loved as a bridge to his heritage. In many ways, this was Carmelo's way of connecting with a father he never got to know, channeling that missing bond into a national identity rather than an individual relationship. But for some in the Black community, that message stung. To them, Puerto Rico hadn't raised Carmelo. Baltimore had. The Black neighborhoods, the culture, the people who surrounded him growing up were the ones who molded his path. His mother, an African American woman, carried the weight of raising him after his father's passing. So, when Melo gave sweeping praise to Puerto Rico as a nation but spoke of his mother only in personal, singular terms, some felt as though his acknowledgement leaned away from the community that had truly shaped his life. This tension reflects a larger conversation about identity and recognition. Commentators like Tariq Nasheed argue that when Black Americans claim their lineage, it's often labeled divisive. Yet when others highlight their ethnic or national pride, whether Puerto Rican, Nigerian, Ugandan, or Kenyan, it's widely accepted, even celebrated. The critique isn't about denying Carmelo's Puerto Rican heritage, but about the tendency to overlook the undeniable role that Black America played in his upbringing, career, and cultural voice. And there's truth to that. Carmelo's basketball foundation was laid in Black neighborhoods, nurtured in Black communities, and supported by a culture that embraced him as one of its own. His story can't be separated from that context. While it's understandable that he honors Puerto Rico as a way of honoring the father he lost, it's equally important not to erase the people and the culture that carried him from childhood to the Hall of Fame. At its core, this debate underscores the richness of Black American culture itself. Culture isn't just food, music, or fashion, it's how people navigate struggle, how they respond to challenges, and how they pass down resilience. That's the culture that shaped Carmelo Anthony, whether he acknowledges it fully or not. When I was in medical school, I didn't really wrestle with cultural identity as a source of stress. My struggles were mostly about the workload and the toughness needed to push through, but living in Africa has given me a new perspective. When challenges come my way now, I find myself leaning on the cultural roots that made me who I am. I hear echoes of gospel voices like James Cleveland reminding me, I don't feel no ways tired. I recall my grandparents' wisdom, their simple yet powerful sayings, if someone else can do it, so can you. Quitters never win, and winners never quit. Or my grandmother's timeless line, you think you know everything, huh? Just keep on living. These aren't just words, they're culture. They're survival tools handed down through generations in the Black American experience. And I notice that even now, without realizing it, I repeat those phrases in my own life. That's how I push through hardship. It's through that cultural lens of resilience, pain, and endurance that I know how to rise again. And that's where the critique of Carmelo Anthony comes in. When he faces challenges, the truth is, he isn't drawing strength from his Puerto Rican heritage. It's the Black American upbringing that gave him those tools. That's the community that raised him, the culture that built his foundation, the one that deserves recognition. Still, maybe Carmelo's emphasis on Puerto Rico is partly optics. The Latino community is rapidly growing, and he belongs to that lineage too. But at the end of the day, we all know the reality. The community that molded him, supported him, and lifted him to greatness was Black America. Without that, there would be no Carmelo Anthony as we know him. So what do you think? This is OD Jackson with another episode of Celebrity Junk. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell, and I'll see you next time.